and welcome to True Creativity Insights. It is March, end of March actually, and it is so beautiful out. I mean, I get to see such a wonderful view of the mountains, and the skies are blue and it's completely clear. The weather's really nice, and I just thought I wanted to just come outside and actually do an episode outside, where it's just really nice to be out of the house. Anyway, in this episode, I'm actually going to talk about the importance of getting your art out into the world and sharing your art with the world. For many of you who've never done this, this is kind of a biggie. I understand it's scary, but I'm first going to talk to you guys about, I'm going to tell you the importance of doing it, but I'm also going to show you how to properly photograph your artwork with your phone, especially if you're on social media like Instagram and Facebook and you want to share your artwork. There are some good tips on how to photograph your art so that it looks its best. And so I'm going to go over that later. I'm also going to talk about, later in the episode, I'm also going to talk about the importance of planting the seeds of resilience when you start getting maybe not so positive comments from friends, family, or even people on Facebook about your artwork. That is always a given in terms of when you put your artwork out there, that you could possibly get something negative, or maybe a comment that was kind of strange and awkward. And the importance of kind of building your resilience when that happens. So I'm going to talk about that later. I'm going to kind of go through a few principles. And then also, I'm really going to start out by talking about the importance of getting your artwork out there. So when I decided to pursue an art career as an artist, I was in my studio, kind of like locked up behind closed doors, experimenting, creating a body of work, and it was nice and safe to have my artwork behind closed doors and in that sacred space, right, that creative space where you're actually just creating art for yourself. And then when I decided to sort of get my artwork out there and I wanted to get my stuff out, start submitting my work in exhibits and shows, and I remember doing my first sort of art festival. It was in the community. It wasn't really anything big, but I do remember the first time I started displaying my work and witnessing and experiencing other people's reaction to my artwork. It was pretty uncomfortable. Number one, I first felt like, wow, these are my babies. I want to protect them. I don't want to share them with anybody, and I don't want to sell them to anybody. It was like this sort of instinctual protection over my babies. So I had to kind of get over that. And just so you know, that's totally normal. We do become very protective over our artwork, but most importantly, having our artwork in the world is a very vulnerable place for us, because we know personally the sort of struggles or, whatever we went through to get that artwork completed, the process of doing that, and also especially when we put our artwork into the world, we are kind of putting our sort of a soul, our spirit out into the world. And that feels pretty vulnerable. It puts us at risk of getting negative criticism. We're afraid people won't like it, or the world won't like our artwork. And then we might feel heartbroken, or just want to, go behind closed doors and hide and not ever put our artwork in the world. But I think what's really important is, why is it important to get our artwork in the world? Well, there's a couple of reasons why it's good. Number one, you would be amazed and surprised how many people out there are willing to be positive, encouraging, and supportive of your artwork. So yeah, you might have some friends and family that love your work, But there's a validation and a value when we get positive feedback from the world, from especially if we have people on Facebook who are following us, and then they actually say, "Hey, we love your stuff, beautiful work." There is something important and valuable about that, because it helps and encourages our artistic journey and growth. We really do need a little bit of that validation that we're actually doing the right thing, or we're exploring the right medium. All that stuff is really important to hear from other people. So that's really one of the reasons why you should show your artwork. Also, being creative and creating art is a gift. So it's a gift to the world that you should not hide behind closed doors and be able to share it with the world. There's a lot of stories about artists that have hidden their work for most of their life, and then they pass away, they die, and all of a sudden they discover, or somebody discovers, a collection of artwork that was hidden, and whether it was a family member or whatever, an art gallery, and realize, wow, this was amazing work. And it's a sad thing that the artist never was able to enjoy while they were alive the positive feedback. So there's a lot of stories out there like that, and it just saddens me to think that people with the ability to create art hid it from the world. So don't let that be the case. Share it, definitely share it. Also, it takes a lot of courage to not only create art, but it takes a lot of courage to share your work with the world. And I think the more you share it out there, the more it kind of toughens you up, and you build a resilience, so that when you have people, like for example, in my experience, when I was at an art festival, I would sit there and I'd literally watch people walk by my table, not even give my artwork a second glance. And that was really uncomfortable to experience and witness. But it really toughened me up to realize, hey, you know what? Not everybody's going to like my work. My work might resonate with some people, and then it might not resonate with others. And that's okay. And that's just the nature of the art world. There are a lot of people who really connect to my art and love it, and purchase it. And then there's some who don't. They don't even bother to give it a second look. So that's totally okay. But when you actually experience that over and over and over, you kind of toughen up. You build a tougher exterior to be able to withstand some of that rejection, right? Because that's also what makes us more vulnerable to sharing our work, is that we're afraid of rejection. So I think when you get your work out there and you experience that rejection, because it's going to happen, and it's part of it comes kind of with the territory. Not everybody's going to like your work. You get sort of resilient to that, and you kind of develop a desensitization to that, so that you can continue to work and do your artwork and create work. So that's what's important, because you don't want like the first rejection or negative criticism to knock you down, and then you don't do your artwork ever again. And I've seen that happen as well. So I just want to say it's a good exercise. It's a good part of your artistic growth, your artistic journey. And so don't be afraid to share your work with the art, with the world. And it can be small. You can actually first share your work with maybe one friend and two friends, and then maybe family members, and then Facebook and Instagram. So you can do it in small steps. So I think that's why it's important to start. And if you've never showed your artwork to anybody, just start thinking about it. You don't have to do it right away, but just start thinking about it, because I think there's an importance in the idea of having an audience. And that audience could be your grandmother, it could be your husband, your spouse, your wife, your partner, your child. The audience could be anyone, and that's a really good place to start. So I don't want you to be afraid of showing your work to anybody. So, and I've come across people who say, oh, it's just not ready or it's not finished. Well, you know what? Sometimes people want to see the process of this is where you started, this is where you're at, and this is where you ended up with your artwork. People love to see the process because that gives them kind of an understanding of how you got from point A to B with your artwork and your final finished piece. So also consider that as well. So I'm trying to remember what else. I think those are the important reasons why you should show your artwork. So for now, I am going to show you how to use your cell phone to photograph your artwork, what kind of lighting is important for your artwork, and what kind of lighting is terrible for your artwork. And also, if you want to get more advanced, you can actually download an app to also do some correcting on your artwork in terms of the photographs. I'll go into that as well, but I basically want to show you the basics in terms of photographing your artwork with your cell phone so that you can upload it to Facebook or Instagram. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now, and then after that, I'm going to talk about the importance of tips on building that resilience. Okay, so let's go in and I'll show you how to do that right now. Okay, so this is the artwork that I'm going to be photographing. And the number one key to photographing your artwork is lighting. You want to make sure that your lighting is evenly distributed. So what's a common mistake that people make, and this is often used with a desktop, like a desk lamp, is that they put on this harsh lighting, which is coming from one resource, right? One source of direction, and it creates this really bright spot here, and then it ends up being really dark here. It also creates these shadow shapes that are kind of harsh and dramatic, which is not what you want for your artwork. You don't want harsh shadows. You want to, in fact, eliminate the shadows as much as possible, because this actually distorts the detail of the artwork. So I'm going to turn this off and you can see the difference. That's a little bit more evenly distributed. I have a light source coming from here and a light source coming from here. So that's kind of evenly distributing the lighting on here. And then I'm going to turn this on again so you can see the difference. So this is what you want to avoid. Okay? Now, another thing too is when you are photographing with your phone, I always have my flash off, because nowadays the new phones really kind of fix the lighting for you. Like, for example, I noticed that the camera on the phones are much brighter. This is an iPhone, and the cameras are much brighter in terms of lighting the subject. So you don't have to worry as much with really dark subject matters. So that's one thing I do, is I always keep the flash off. Another thing too is if you do have a little bit of shadow going on here, and actually it looks pretty even here, but I will use like a foil, so I have this piece of foil taped on a piece of cardboard, and I will actually put it on this side or any side that has a little bit too much shadow, and that will evenly distribute the lighting. So I just want to give you that tip, that you can also put a piece of whiteboard which will reflect. So what you're doing is when you're doing this, you're reflecting the light off of the piece so that you get rid of those shadows. Okay? And then another thing to think about is how you're putting this, how you're putting the artwork, positioning the artwork in your camera. I usually just take it like this. And also another thing too, I always keep an eye on my vertical being aligned with the edge of the screen. If you do this, for example, where you're tilting, your artwork is going to go at an angle. And that isn't always the best image to, best way to capture your image. You want to have it directly over your artwork. That means it's just directly over your artwork. You're not doing this, you're not doing this, you're not doing this, because we do have a habit with our phones to actually hold it at an angle. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. Don't angle your phone, just do it flat right over. And then also line up your vertical. Find something that's going to keep this straight. If you have it somewhat at an angle and it's crooked, keep in mind that that's going to conflict with the frame. This is what you call the frame. So that's something that you want to remember. So then I'm going to actually, first of all, always focus, and then I will click. Now, another thing that you can do, and most phones have this, is you can then edit in your phone. And I will go to my edit, and this way I can now crop all this extra background. I often have people take photographs over their desk, and you can see their legs, you can see their shoes, you can see the little puppy that's next to their feet. That is distracting from your artwork. So make sure that you actually crop your art. This is the best way to display your art. So I'm actually cropping with, and usually cell phones already have this built in to their settings, so make sure you can check that out. There's also apps that do this as well. And then I will just crop it. And you can see the difference. It looks much better without that white background. So that's something to also remember. Now, I emphasize doing it straight above it. But if there's some detail, like something like this has a lot of detail that has a little bit of dimension, I will then go at an angle and have it close up so that I can then take a photo of it and see the actual cord that's wrapped around the ceramic piece. This will give me a little bit more detail that I can share with, on my Facebook. So that's something to think about too if you want to get a little bit closer. But that is because you are purposely going for the closer up detail of your artwork. So that's why it's always good to provide multiple shots of your piece, not just one, so that somebody can get a feel of all the details, like, oh, that's fabric, and that's an interesting handmade paper, or this is, oh, I didn't see the leaf on the ceramic piece. That is also a good way to share. So when you're sending photographs to somebody who might be interested in your artwork, or you're trying to submit something, it's good to show a couple of different angles of your artwork. Okay, so now another thing I want to talk about is, well, I mentioned that the flash should be off, but I'm going to show you. Okay, so I just turned on my flash, and I turned down the lights. So if I were to use a flash, you will see that there is, kind of a reflection here. And that's another thing too. If there's areas of your artwork that actually reflect, or maybe you have objects in your mixed media piece, it will reflect the flash. So be careful of using the flash. That's why I just never use the flash at all. If it's too dark in your studio or your desk, on your desk or your office, I recommend taking it outside during the day and taking a photograph of it in the shade. So I'm going to go ahead and take this piece and show you what that looks like. Okay, I have this outside and it's in the shade, and it's about, I'm going to say about 5 o'clock. So it's not too bright, but you can see how the light, because the light is reflected on, it evenly gets distributed in the shade. You can see how it kind of evens out throughout your artwork. Now, if you'll notice, I have a little bit of a shadow here. And one of the things you can do is you can put a reflection, right? Yeah, the foil right up to that, and that will light that just a tad bit to get rid of that darkness. You can also put it on this side, and I want you to see, just focus on the shadow here. When I bring something reflective, that gets rid of the shadow. It doesn't look as dark and stark. So that's something that you can also do. So this again is the best lighting, because indoor lighting often, depending on your bulb, if you have LED, if you have fluorescent, will cast a slight color on your artwork. So for example, if you have fluorescent, you'll get a green cast, or if you have an ambient light, it'll be a little bit warm, more on the yellow side. But with daylight, you have what they call color-corrected lighting. And that way you'll have more accurate capture of the colors that you're using in your artwork. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of using daylight. Daylight is always the best. Okay? So I'm going to go in and then we can compare the difference. I also wanted to show you now, I have all my lighting off, but I have lights on in the ceiling in the room. And you can see how you have a lot of shadows going on. So you want to keep in mind that sometimes the lighting in the room, you think what you see is light, isn't necessarily going to look good on your art. So, for example, if I were to take a photo of this, I would get a lot of unwanted shadows, right? And then especially if I had my flash on, that would look really weird. So I'm going to go ahead and actually show you comparison. So now I'm going to talk about the importance of building up a resilience to either rejection, negative feedback, criticism when it comes to your art. So it's going to be very important to build that so that it doesn't discourage you from continuing to do your art making, and it doesn't discourage you from continuing to live an artful, creative life. So the importance of that is to build some form of resilience. So number one, when you get a negative feedback or criticism, determine the validity. In other words, where is that coming from? Where is the negative feedback coming from? Is that person educated? Do they have credentials, the experience and history to actually make their opinion or their feedback valid and important? Also, where is that person in their own career? There is often times when somebody is not doing their own artwork, or they're struggling with their art career, it's easy for people like that to be more critical of others who are doing art and living that creative life. So sometimes people like that either are unsatisfied with their careers, their own art making, and they can come from a place of being jealous or envious. So you really need to be careful of that. And sometimes we have family members who are like that, that they're just jealous that you are actually doing the creative work. And so they find sometimes projecting some of that dissatisfaction onto you through a negative criticism. So you really have to question the validity of the negative feedback or comment. Number two, don't take it personal. It's not personal. People's opinion or any artistic opinion can be subjective. Everybody has their own preferences. Everybody has their own taste. Everybody has a different background, different education or experience. So that can affect how they view your art. So it's important to keep that in mind, that the criticism isn't necessarily towards you, but it's maybe towards the artwork, and being able to create a little bit of a buffer between you and your art and your creation is very important so that you won't take it personal. That's why it's good to have a safe distance. And that's another way of protecting your heart or your heart. So keeping that in mind, try not to take it so personal when you have a negative feedback. Also, number three, don't generalize. Just because you had maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 criticisms, don't generalize that as, oh, I suck as an artist. All my work is horrible. I'm never going to do it again. I have watched people do this where they actually take maybe even 1 or 2 negative criticisms and actually apply that to their entire creative career, their entire body of work, their entire intention to live a creative life. So it's very important not to generalize, because you will have pieces that people love, that you might get tons of positive feedback, and that's important to take a look at. That will outweigh the negative. So don't generalize or overly focus on just the negative feedback and then have that umbrella all of your work. That's very important to keep that in mind, okay? So, and another thing is, don't compare. It's very important to try not to compare. I know, that's a natural thing to do, is we compare our artwork or our talents or skills with someone else who might appear to be better or might appear to have better work than us. That only sends you down a road of being discouraged and unmotivated and uninspired, and maybe even to a point where you want to give up. So make sure that you try to restrain from comparing yourself, unless you can use that comparison as inspiration for you to continue to move forward in your artistic journey, and to maybe be an inspiration for you to improve your skills or get new skills. So that's also an important aspect of building that resilience, is not comparing yourselves to other artists, or even when you're in a workshop and you have other students next to you, try not to compare your work with theirs. Another important thing in terms of resilience is using negative feedback as motivation to move up in your level of our artistic skills, to maybe realize, oh, I do need more color mixing understanding and principles and theories, or maybe I do need to take more classes so I can get comfortable with working with acrylic paint or collaging, whatever that is. Just be open to using that as motivation to improve yourself as an artist, to improve your artistic skills and knowledge, and to keep pressing forward with your growth as an artist. And most importantly, be kind to yourself. Try not to use the negative feedback or criticism to be the reason why now you are harsher on yourself, or you beat yourself up for not being good enough or talented or artistic enough. Be kind to yourself. That's going to be very important in terms of building resilience, is being kind to yourself and being able to say, hey, you know what? Those words really hurt me, but I'm not going to let that stop me from making my art. And also being kind to yourself is reminding, not everybody's going to get my art or like my art. That's okay. I love my art. Being kind to yourself is also putting in priority. I happen to love my own artwork, and I'm going to keep making it this style or this way, or keep doing it in the way that I do it because I love it. And lastly, I'm going to leave you with this. When you are just starting to put your work out into the world, start out by being selective on who you share your artwork with. Make sure that the people that you share your work with are encouraging, supportive, positive people that believe in you as an artist. Until you start to feel a little bit more confident and more resilient, and then you can expand your circle. So be very selective about that, and realize that when you're just starting out, it can be a little bit vulnerable. So you want to be very selective. So I hope that helped you in terms of building your resilience and give you the courage to get your work out there in the world. For those of you who have taken my art classes, my workshops, or retreats, I have a new Facebook group called True Creativity Within Community that you can join and post the work that you've created in my classes and the work that you're creating on your own. So I welcome you to join that group. And also thank you for watching True Creativity Insights. I hope that you will subscribe to my YouTube channel. And until next time, take care and stay creative. Bye.